When the world gathers, when leaders sit at the table, when the biggest powers look into each other's eyes, there comes a moment that defines not just diplomacy but destiny. That is what the Alaska summit was for India. It was not a regular meeting, not another discussion, not another round of empty handshakes. It was a battlefield of ideas, a test of strength, a clash of wills, and India walked in not as a follower, not as a guest, but as a force that demanded attention, respect, and recognition. You see, history doesn't change in quiet corners. It changes in bold confrontations. It changes when one nation decides it will no longer play by someone else's script, when it stands tall and speaks with a voice that cannot be ignored. That is exactly what India did. At that table, across from the most powerful nations on earth, India made it clear the era of being underestimated is over. The time of being overlooked is gone. This is the rise of a new power that will not bend, that will not break, and that will not apologize for its ambitions. Think about it. For decades, summits like this were arenas where the West dictated terms. They set the rules, they defined the agenda, and others were expected to listen politely, nod, and follow. But this time it was different. This time India came prepared not to listen but to lead. It didn't walk in seeking validation. It walked in carrying the weight of 4 billion voices, the determination of a nation that has fought wars, overcome poverty, broken barriers, and emerged stronger every single time. The Alaska summit was more than a diplomatic exchange. It was a declaration. A declaration that India will not be boxed into the role of a junior partner. A declaration that India is ready to shape the global order, not just adapt to it. A declaration that from this moment forward, decisions about the future of the world must include the perspective, the power, and the priorities of India. That is why this summit was a game changer. Picture the scene. Leaders from the world's most dominant countries staring across the table, expecting business as usual. They thought India would be cautious, reserved, hesitant to challenge the status quo. But instead, they found a nation that was unapologetically bold, crystal clear, and unshakably confident. They found negotiators who didn't flinch, who didn't retreat, who didn't compromise their core values. They found a delegation that spoke with one voice, the voice of strength, pride, and unyielding conviction. Now let's be clear, power respects power. In the world of geopolitics, hesitation is weakness and weakness is punished. But when you show strength, when you project clarity, when you stand your ground, the room shifts. That is exactly what happened. India didn't just earn respect, it commanded it, and once respect is earned at that level, everything changes. Doors open, alliances shift, opportunities multiply. The Alaska summit marked the moment when the world realized India is not just rising, India has risen. This wasn't about empty symbolism, this was about real leverage. From technology to trade, from defense to energy, from climate to security, India put its cards on the table and made it clear. Partnerships must be partnerships of equals. No more one-sided deals, no more dictated strategies, no more being told what role to play. India is writing its own script and others must adapt to it. But what makes this truly powerful is not just what India said, it's what India has become. This is a nation with one of the fastest growing economies in the world, a nation that has sent missions to Mars on a fraction of the budget others spent, a nation that leads in digital infrastructure, renewable energy, space exploration, and defense capabilities. This is a nation with the demographic advantage of a young, ambitious population. This is a nation that blends ancient wisdom with cutting-edge innovation. So when India speaks, it doesn't speak from a position of wishful thinking. It speaks from a foundation of undeniable achievements. The Alaska Summit, it was not a performance, it was proof. Proof that India has crossed the threshold from potential to power. Proof that India is no longer waiting for permission to lead. Proof that India is ready, willing, and able to take on the responsibility of shaping the global future. And make no mistake, the world noticed. Every headline, every analyst, every diplomat walked away from that summit knowing one thing: the balance of power is shifting. The old order is trembling, the emerging order has India at its center. That is why this moment is historic, because the summit didn't just change how others see India, it changed how India sees itself. For decades, there was always this question: can India really lead? Can India truly challenge the established powers? Can India stand up to pressure and hold its ground? The Alaska summit answered those questions with a thunderous yes. Yes, India can lead. Yes, India can challenge. Yes, India can stand unshaken in the face of the strongest. And this is where the game changes. Once a nation knows its own power, there is no going back. Once it realizes that the world listens when it speaks, respects when it acts, and follows when it leads, everything transforms. That confidence, that self-belief becomes unstoppable. India walked into that summit with ambition. It walked out with destiny, but let's dig deeper. Why is this so significant? Because geopolitics is not just about speeches and documents. It's about psychology. It's about the perception of power. When the world believes you are strong, your strength multiplies. When they see you as weak, your weakness multiplies. What happened in Alaska was a psychological turning point. The perception of India shifted. No longer the quiet participant, no longer the background actor. India became the main character on the stage. Think about what that means for the future. Every trade negotiation, every defense agreement, every international discussion will now take place in the shadow of this new perception. Allies will treat India as essential, not optional. Rivals will treat India as formidable, not dismissible. And partners will treat India as equal, not secondary. That is the ripple effect of what happened in Alaska. And let's not forget, this is not just about government officials. This is about the people of India, because when the world sees your country with new respect, that pride flows back home. It fuels innovation, it inspires entrepreneurs, it strengthens communities. It tells every young Indian that their nation is not just participating in history, it is making history. That kind of pride is a force multiplier. It lifts an entire generation higher. Of course, let's be real, this is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. A summit alone doesn't change the world. What changes the world is what comes after, the deals that are signed, the policies that are implemented, the alliances that are forged. But here is the difference: India is now negotiating from a position of strength. And in international relations, strength is everything. So let's be clear. The Alaska Summit was not just another event on the calendar. It was not just another headline. It was the day India drew a line in the sand and said, we will no longer be shaped by history, we will shape it ourselves. It was the day India proved that it is not the future of the world order, it is the present. It was the day India showed the courage to look the strongest powers in the eye and say, we are here, we are ready, and we are not leaving the table. And let me tell you something, this is only the beginning, because once a nation steps into its role as a leader, it doesn't retreat, it doesn't go back into the shadows, it keeps pushing forward, it keeps demanding more. It keeps raising the bar. That is what India will do now. Every move, every policy, every strategy will be bolder, sharper, stronger. The Alaska Summit lit the fire. Now it's time for India to burn brighter than ever before. The world has been put on notice. India is not waiting. India is not asking. India is not following. India is leading. And from this day forward, the game will never be the same. That is why the Alaska Summit is not just a meeting. It is a milestone. It is a turning point. It is a game changer. Because in Alaska, the world saw not just a nation, but a force, not just a participant, but a powerhouse, not just a country, but a leader. And from this point on, nothing will ever be the same again. Alaska was not just a summit, it was India's declaration of unstoppable momentum. To understand why, you have to look beyond the polished photographs and the carefully worded press releases. You have to see the undercurrent of history, the layers of power, the intensity of conviction that carried India into that room and out of it with a completely transformed global identity. For too long, international summits were places where India's presence was acknowledged but not truly felt. It was treated as a nation with potential, a nation with promise, but rarely as the one that would change the conversation. The Alaska Summit shattered that perception. India walked in as a participant, but it walked out as the compass guiding where the future must head. That shift cannot be underestimated because momentum is not about one victory. It is about setting into motion a force that cannot be stopped, a trajectory that only accelerates. Momentum is built when preparation meets opportunity. India did not stumble into Alaska unprepared. Decades of resilience, decades of climbing from poverty into prosperity, from dependency into independence, from imitation into innovation, laid the foundation for that moment. The world had been watching India's rise, but in Alaska the world finally had to confront it. It was no longer an abstract idea of India's future. It became a living reality, undeniable and unshakable. Momentum comes when a nation proves it can no longer be ignored, and that proof was delivered with strength and clarity. Every statement made, every position defended, every line drawn in that sum, it was not the voice of hesitation. It was the voice of destiny claiming its space. That is why it was not just a meeting, it was a declaration. Consider how momentum works in geopolitics. A single event can shift perception, and perception reshapes reality. Before Alaska, India was already known as a rising power, but in the eyes of many, it was still rising. Still not quite there, still a nation to be tested, but after Alaska that changed. Once you declare your momentum on the global stage, the world reacts differently. Allies begin to realign, rivals begin to recalculate. Neutral states begin to recognize your gravity. The moment you show that you are no longer playing catch-up, the game itself changes. That is what happened. India displayed not just ambition, but authority. It displayed not just vision, but validation. It displayed not just strength, but staying power. That kind of demonstration does not fade after the summit ends. It multiplies. Momentum is also psychological. It is not only about what the world thinks of India, but what India thinks of itself. For decades, self-doubt was planted by narratives of colonization, of economic dependence, of foreign dominance. But in recent years, India has been rewriting its story. And in Alaska, the narrative reached a peak. The confidence that comes from being respected in the toughest of global rooms is fuel. It tells every citizen back home that their nation has crossed the invisible line between potential and power. When that realization spreads across 1 billion people, it creates a surge of belief, and belief is the most powerful form of energy. That energy is what unstoppable momentum looks like. Because once a people believe they cannot be denied, they build, they innovate, they defend, they rise faster than ever before. At the Alaska summit, the declaration was not made with speeches alone. It was in the posture, the tone, the refusal to yield under pressure. Great powers test one another not only through what is said, but how it is said, how firm you remain when challenged, how unshaken you stand when provoked. India stood firm. India refused to let its agenda be dictated. India showed the discipline of a seasoned power and the ambition of a youthful nation all at once. That duality is lethal in the world of diplomacy. It tells adversaries that you are not afraid of confrontation, and it tells allies that you are worthy of trust. Once such a message is delivered, it cannot be undone. It is written into the psyche of international relations. That is why Alaska was not just an event. It was ignition. Now think about the timing. The world is in flux. Old powers are struggling with internal division, economic stagnation, and fading influence. New powers are rising, but many lack the stability or the legitimacy to lead. In this environment, a steady, determined, democratic giant like India enters the stage and declares its unstoppable momentum. That changes everything, because momentum is not only about speed, it is about direction. The world is looking for direction, for leadership that balances strength with principle, ambition with responsibility. India's presence in Alaska gave that direction. It showed that leadership in the new era will not come from the old playbooks. It will come from nations that are resilient, inclusive, technologically advanced, and unafraid of charting new paths. That is what India symbolized, and once symbolized, it becomes reality. The unstoppable nature of India's momentum is tied to its foundation. This is not a fragile rise built on borrowed resources or external approval. This is a rise built on demographic power, technological innovation, and economic growth that has withstood global crises. It is built on a culture that has survived thousands of years, on values that outlasted empires, on adaptability that no storm could break. That kind of foundation means momentum cannot be disrupted easily. Summits like Alaska only accelerate what was already inevitable. But when that inevitability is declared, when it is made visible to the entire world in a single defining moment, the acceleration becomes explosive. Suddenly, the world recalculates timelines. What they thought would happen in 10 years, they now expect in 5. What they thought was a dream becomes a reality before their eyes. That is the difference Alaska made. Momentum also creates pressure not on India, but on others. When one nation declares itself unstoppable, others must respond. Some will seek alignment, hoping to share in the energy of India's rise. Others will resist, fearing the erosion of their own dominance. But either way, the conversation revolves around India. That is the power of momentum. It forces everyone else to react to you instead of you reacting to them. In Alaska, India seized that dynamic. It became the mover, not the moved. It became the center, not the periphery. And in geopolitics, once you occupy the center, every path leads back to you. That centrality is not given, it is earned, and it was earned in Alaska. For the Indian people, unstoppable momentum means more than pride. It means opportunity. Every declaration made at the summit translates into real possibilities: stronger trade deals, better defense cooperation, more access to technology, greater influence in shaping global rules. It means more respect for Indian students, Indian businesses, Indian professionals across the world. It means that being Indian now carries with it a badge of influence, not just identity. When that shift happens, a nation's growth multiplies beyond economics. It seeps into culture, into perception, into everyday life. That is what makes momentum unstoppable. It doesn't just change policy, it changes identity. An identity, once transformed, does not reverse. The unstoppable momentum declared in Alaska was not about arrogance. It was about balance. It was about showing the world that India's rise is not a threat, but a fact. It was about asserting that India seeks cooperation, but only on equal terms. It was about reminding the globe that leadership is not about dominance, but about resilience, about the ability to endure, adapt, and inspire. That kind of momentum is not destructive, it is constructive. It builds bridges even as it holds firm. It invites partnership even as it rejects subservience. It is momentum with discipline, with direction, with dignity. And such momentum, once declared, does not fade, it grows.